The chapel was swathed in muted tones of black and gray, heavy with the scent of lilies and the weight of whispered condolences. Kenneth Winter's funeral was a solemn affair, attended by New York City's elite and shadowed by a palpable sense of loss. Yet, amidst the crowd of mourners, one voice shattered the reverence like a shard of glass. "Dad's not dead." Nathan Winters, Kenneth's 12-year-old son, declared, his voice trembling but resolute. The boy stood at the front of the room, his tear-streaked face turned toward the casket that loomed ominously behind him. "I saw him 3 days ago. In Central Park." A wave of gasps swept through the room, and the murmurs quickly turned into a cacophony. Henry Winters, Kenneth's younger brother, froze in his seat, his instincts, dulled by years away from investigative journalism, roared back to life. Nathan's words were more than a child's denial. They carried a ring of truth that Henry couldn't ignore. "Impossible," someone muttered. Another voice dismissed it as grief talking. But Nathan's wide, unblinking eyes told a different story. After the funeral, Henry cornered Linda Garvey, Kenneth's lawyer and longtime friend. "Why was the casket sealed?" Henry demanded. Linda hesitated, her normally composed demeanor faltering. "There were complications. The body was deemed unfit for viewing. That's all I was told." Henry narrowed his eyes. "Who told you that?" She sighed. "The hospital director. But when I asked for details, they were unusually evasive. Something felt off." The missing death certificate and lack of a police report only deepened the mystery. If Kenneth had died in a car accident, as reported, why wasn't there any formal documentation? Later that evening, Henry found himself sitting with Nathan in Kenneth's penthouse. The boy fidgeted with a sketchpad, his pencil scratching out aimless shapes. "You said you saw your dad in the park." Henry began cautiously. "Can you tell me more?" Nathan's eyes lit up with hope. "I was playing near the fountain, and I saw him sitting on a bench. I called out, but he didn't hear me. I ran after him, but by the time I got there, he was gone." Henry frowned. "Did you tell anyone?" Nathan nodded. "Mom said I was imagining things. But, he wasn't wearing his wedding ring." The statement jolted Henry. Kenneth was known for being meticulous. His wedding ring was practically a part of him. Nathan's observation was too specific to dismiss. Determined to find answers, Henry visited the hospital where Kenneth was allegedly taken after the accident. The receptionist's tight smile turned into a grimace when he mentioned Kenneth's name. "We don't have any records of him," she said. "That's impossible," Henry snapped. "He was declared dead here." The woman's gaze flickered nervously before she leaned in. "You didn't hear this from me." But the body was moved quickly. "The orders came from someone high up." "Who?" Henry pressed. She shook her head. "I don't know. But they were adamant that no paperwork be filed." That night, Henry returned to his apartment with a growing sense of unease. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid trembling in his hand as he replayed the day's events. The sealed casket, the missing death certificate, the boy's haunting claim. A rustling sound snapped him out of his thoughts. Someone was outside his door. Henry grabbed a kitchen knife and moved cautiously. When he flung the door open, the hallway was empty. At his feet lay a plain envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, scrawled with messy, hurried handwriting. "Stop asking questions, or you'll regret it." Henry's pulse raced. Whoever was behind Kenneth's disappearance was watching him, and they wanted him to back off. The following morning, Henry met Miranda Chase, a former colleague from his days as an investigative journalist. "Sounds like you've got yourself a story," she said, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "I'm not looking for a story," Henry muttered. "I just want the truth." Miranda's smirk faded. "Be careful, Henry. Whoever's behind this has power, and they won't hesitate to use it." The small bell above the jewelry store's door jingled as Henry stepped inside. The Manhattan jeweler's showroom gleamed under soft lighting, the counters filled with extravagant designs meant to dazzle the city's elite. Behind the counter stood a thin man with graying hair and keen eyes. His name tag read Oscar. "Can I help you?" Oscar asked, his voice polite but wary as he studied Henry's disheveled appearance. "I'm looking for information about this ring," Henry said, sliding a photo of Kenneth's wedding ring across the glass. Nathan had found an old picture of it on his mother's phone. Its distinctive engraving visible. Oscar's brow furrowed as he examined the photo. "Ah, yes. A man brought this in about 2 weeks ago. He said it needed a minor repair." claimed the clasp on the engraving had worn loose. Henry's heart skipped. Can you describe him? Oscar hesitated. Average height, dark hair, mid-40s. He seemed familiar, but I couldn't place him. Do you know him? Henry nodded, his throat tight. That's my brother, Kenneth Winters. Oscar blinked in surprise but said nothing more. Henry pressed him. Do you have surveillance footage? Anything from the day he came in? Oscar sighed, reluctant but cooperative. I keep security logs for insurance. Give me a moment. Minutes later, Henry watched grainy footage from the store's cameras. There was no mistaking it. Kenneth Winters, alive and well, entered the store, handed over the ring, and left with an air of tension. Glancing over his shoulder as though being followed, Henry stared at the screen. His suspicions confirmed. Kenneth wasn't just alive, he was on the run. Henry left the jewelry store with a renewed sense of urgency. He contacted Ethan Coleman, a reclusive tech expert Henry had worked with in his journalism days. Ethan was a genius with computers, but his disdain for the law often bordered on reckless. I need a favor, Henry said over the phone. Don't we all? Ethan replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. What's the job? Track someone for me. Kenneth Winters. A pause. Then, Ethan's tone grew serious. Your brother? The guy who's supposed to be dead? Yeah, Henry muttered. But he's not. Ethan agreed, albeit reluctantly. Hours later, Henry met him in a dimly lit loft filled with the hum of servers and glowing monitors. I did some digging, Ethan said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Your brother was poking around in some dangerous circles. There's chatter about him collecting evidence, bank records, offshore accounts, even videos of high-level meetings. Evidence of what? Henry asked, leaning forward. Money laundering, human trafficking, illegal arms deals, you name it, and all roads lead to one man. Ethan pulled up a file. The face of Tristan Long filling the screen. A charismatic billionaire philanthropist. Tristan was the darling of Manhattan's social elite. But behind the charm was a dark reputation that only a few dared to whisper about. He's the head of the snake, Ethan said. If Kenneth has evidence against him, it's enough to bring down an empire. The next day, Henry returned to Kenneth's penthouse to find Nathan sitting on the floor, clutching a stuffed bear. His mother, Allison, stood nearby, her face drawn with worry. He's not safe here, Henry said bluntly, his paranoia mounting. You need to leave the city. Leave? Where would we go? Allison demanded. And what are you doing? Henry, you're dragging Nathan into your wild theories. It's not a theory, Henry snapped, his voice rising. Kenneth is alive, and if I don't find him, whoever's after him will come for you too. Nathan tugged on his uncle's sleeve. Uncle Henry, are the bad people going to hurt us? Henry crouched down, his voice softening. Not if I can help it. Later that night, Henry's fears were realized. As he returned to his apartment, two men emerged from the shadows. Their faces were obscured by ski masks, their movements deliberate and menacing. Walk away, one of them growled, brandishing a knife. Forget about Kenneth Winters. Henry's instincts kicked in. He grabbed a trash can lid from the sidewalk and swung it like a shield, deflecting the knife. The fight was brutal and messy, but years of street smarts kept Henry alive. He managed to knock one attacker unconscious while the other fled. In the pocket of the unconscious man, Henry found a note. This is your last warning. Henry turned to Linda Garvey, who had reluctantly agreed to help. He laid out what he knew: Kenneth's appearance in the jewelry store, the surveillance footage, and Ethan's discovery about Tristan Long. You're telling me Tristan Long is involved? Linda asked, incredulous. Do you know what you're saying? He's untouchable. Not if I can prove Kenneth is alive and has the evidence, Henry countered. Linda shook her head. This isn't just about proof. If you go after Tristan, you'll be putting all of us in danger, including Nathan. The tension between them was palpable. Henry's recklessness clashed with Linda's cautious pragmatism, but they both knew they needed each other. Henry's investigation into Tristan Long painted a chilling picture. Beneath the philanthropist's public image lay a history of intimidation, bribery, and violence. Ethan hacked into Tristan's private communications, revealing encrypted orders to eliminate all risks. The phrasing was vague but unmistakable. Tristan was cleaning house. Among the intercepted messages was one that made Henry's blood run cold. Target the boy if necessary. Nathan was no longer safe. Henry moved quickly, relocating Nathan and Allison to a safe house. But the syndicate's reach was vast. One night, an SUV followed them through the streets of Manhattan, forcing Henry to use every trick in the book to lose their tail. As they hid in a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city, Nathan asked a question that broke Henry's heart. Why are they doing this? Henry struggled for an answer. Because your dad was brave enough to stand up to them. The tension in the safe house was suffocating. Henry paced the small living room, glancing at his phone every few minutes. Linda and Ethan sat nearby, poring over stolen files that detailed Tristan Long's sprawling empire. I still don't get it, Linda said, tapping a document. Why go to such extremes? Why fake Kenneth's death instead of just silencing him outright? Because Kenneth has something they can't risk being exposed. Ethan interjected, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Tristan's network isn't just a criminal syndicate, it's a fortress. Politicians, CEOs, law enforcement, he owns them all. If Kenneth has the key to unlock that, Tristan can't afford to kill him until he's sure the evidence is destroyed. Henry's jaw tightened, which means Kenneth is alive, but running out of time. A break came unexpectedly when Miranda Chase, Henry's journalist friend, called with a lead. I found someone who might help, she said, a whistleblower who used to work for Tristan. His name's Felix Moreno. Felix was a mid-level accountant in Tristan's syndicate who had fled after discovering the true nature of the operation. He agreed to meet Henry at a diner on the outskirts of Queens. When Henry arrived, Felix was jittery, his eyes darting to every shadow. You're insane for digging into this, Felix said, his voice trembling. But you're right, Kenneth's alive. I saw him. Where? Henry pressed. Felix hesitated. They're holding him in a facility outside the city. It looks abandoned, but it's fortified. If you're going to get him out, you'll need more than guts. Before Felix could say more, a bullet shattered the diner window. Chaos erupted as patrons screamed and scrambled for cover. Henry dragged Felix to the floor, shielding him as another shot rang out. By the time Henry reached the parking lot, the shooter was gone. Felix, bleeding but alive, was rushed to a hospital. Before losing consciousness, he muttered one final clue, the old factory. Riverdale. Henry, Linda, and Ethan drove to the outskirts of Riverdale, where an old industrial factory loomed like a monolith. Its rusted exterior and broken windows did little to hide the activity within. Guards patrolled the perimeter, and faint lights glowed from inside. This is it, Ethan confirmed, scanning the area with a drone. Kenneth's in there. I'd bet my servers on it. Henry's pulse quickened. How do we get in? Ethan smirked. Leave that to me. Over the next few days, the trio devised a plan. Ethan would disable the facility's security systems, giving Henry and Linda a narrow window to infiltrate. Meanwhile, Linda worked to obtain a court order, hoping to have law enforcement raid the site once Kenneth was safely out. As they prepared, Tristan Long made his next move. Nathan and Allison, hidden in the safe house, were attacked by masked men. Henry arrived just in time, fending off the assailants in a brutal fight. One of the attackers was captured, and under duress, he revealed Tristan's growing desperation. He knows you're closing in, the man confessed, and he'll kill everyone to stop you. The attack hardened Henry's resolve. He moved Allison and Nathan to a new location, guarded by an old friend who owed him a favor. No more running, Henry told Nathan. We're going to finish this. Under the cover of darkness, Henry and Linda approached the factory. Ethan's voice crackled through their earpieces. Security's down. You've got 10 minutes before the backup system kicks in. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of oil and rust. The building's labyrinthine corridors were eerily silent, save for the faint hum of generators. Henry's heart pounded as they reached the central chamber. There, restrained but alive, was Kenneth. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, but recognition flickered as he saw his brother. Henry, Kenneth croaked. You shouldn't be here. No time for that, Henry said, cutting the restraints. We're getting you out. But as they turned to leave, the alarms blared. The backup security system had activated, and guards swarmed the facility. The escape was chaotic. Ethan guided them through the building, hacking doors and distracting guards with false alarms. Linda, armed with a handgun, covered their retreat, her usually composed demeanor replaced with steely resolve. They reached the exit, only to find Tristan Long himself waiting, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. Tristan exuded calm menace. You've gone to great lengths to ruin my plans, he said, his voice cold. But you've underestimated me. A standoff ensued. Kenneth, weak but defiant, stepped forward. Your empire's over. Tristan, I have everything I need to destroy you. Tristan's smirk faltered. You'll never make it out alive. Before Tristan could act, sirens pierced the air. Linda's court order had worked. The NYPD stormed the facility. Tristan fled, but not before issuing a chilling promise. This isn't over. Safely out of the facility, Kenneth revealed the full extent of Tristan's crimes. He handed over a USB drive containing the evidence he'd risked everything to collect: bank transactions, recorded meetings, and witness testimonies. But his revelation came with a confession. Kenneth had once been complicit in Tristan's operation. It was only after realizing the true scale of the harm caused that he turned against the syndicate. I'm not a hero, Kenneth admitted, but I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. Henry, shaken but resolute, assured him, it's not too late to make things right. The evidence Kenneth handed over was explosive, but it wasn't enough to dismantle Tristan Long's empire on its own. The USB drive contained files on offshore accounts, encrypted communications, and witness statements, but without corroboration. Tristan's lawyers could spin it as fabricated. This isn't enough, Linda said, pacing her office. We need someone credible to testify. Someone who was in Tristan's inner circle. Ethan chimed in, his voice coming through a video call. Felix Moreno is still in the hospital, but I've been digging into his digital footprint. Turns out, he wasn't just an accountant, he managed Tristan's personal ledgers. Henry leaned forward. You're saying Felix has more dirt? Enough to bury Tristan, Ethan replied, if we can get him to testify. Linda sighed. That's a big if. Tristan's people will be gunning for him. Henry's jaw clenched. Then we'll make sure they don't get to him first. Felix Moreno was moved to a secure location under police protection. Henry, still paranoid, insisted on shadowing the detail himself. His instincts proved right when an attempted hit on Felix was foiled by a last-minute intervention. The near miss left Felix shaken but resolute. I'll testify, he said, his voice trembling. I've been running from this for too long. With Felix's testimony, Linda filed an emergency motion to bring Tristan Long to trial. The court date was set, but Tristan, now cornered, began deploying every weapon in his arsenal to discredit Kenneth, Henry, and Felix. Tristan's legal team flooded the courts with motions, claiming the evidence was forged and the witnesses unreliable. The media, bought and paid for by Tristan, painted Kenneth as a disgraced businessman trying to save himself by framing an innocent philanthropist. Nathan became a target as well. School bullies, likely coached by their parents, taunted him relentlessly. Your dad's a liar, they jeered, leaving Nathan in tears. Henry tried to reassure the boy, but the strain was evident. You don't have to be brave all the time, Henry told him, but remember, the truth is on our side. The courtroom was packed on the first day of Tristan's trial. Cameras flashed as the city's most notorious figure was escorted inside, flanked by his high-powered legal team. Kenneth, Linda, Henry, and Felix sat on the opposite side, a smaller but equally determined group. The prosecution opened with Kenneth's testimony. He detailed his initial involvement with Tristan's organization, his growing unease, and his decision to gather evidence. The defense hammered him with accusations of betrayal and self-interest. But Kenneth held his ground. Felix's testimony was next. He presented detailed records of Tristan's financial crimes, connecting them to the syndicate's broader operations. His composure wavered under cross-examination, but Linda's careful preparation kept him steady. Midway through the trial, a surprise witness came forward, Miranda Chase, the journalist who had been quietly investigating Tristan for years. She unveiled hidden recordings of Tristan threatening associates, further solidifying the case against him. Tristan's calm facade began to crack. He lashed out in court, calling Miranda a liar and Kenneth a traitor. The judge reprimanded him, but the outburst only solidified the image of a desperate man clinging to power. The trial's climax came when Kenneth revealed the final piece of evidence, a video of Tristan ordering the abduction of Kenneth. The recording, recovered by Ethan from encrypted servers, left no room for doubt. Tristan's lawyers scrambled to dismiss it, claiming it was deepfake technology. But experts testified to its authenticity. The courtroom erupted into chaos as the jury took in the damning evidence. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty. Tristan Long was convicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy, money laundering, and kidnapping. His empire crumbled as his associates were arrested, and his assets were frozen. The once untouchable mogul now faced decades behind bars. As Tristan was led away, he glared at Kenneth and Henry. "This isn't over," he hissed. But for the first time in weeks, Henry felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Justice had prevailed. In the aftermath, Kenneth began rebuilding his life. He publicly apologized for his past mistakes and used his remaining resources to support organizations fighting corruption and organized crime. Nathan, once a scared and confused boy, found his confidence again. He started a journal, documenting his father's bravery and his own journey through the ordeal. Henry returned to his private investigation work with a renewed sense of purpose. He'd spent years running from his past, but now he understood the importance of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Months later, the Winters family gathered in Central Park, the same place Nathan had first seen Kenneth alive. The air was crisp, the sun casting golden rays through the trees. "You did it, Dad," Nathan said, looking up at Kenneth with pride. "We all did," Kenneth replied, ruffling his son's hair. Henry watched them from a distance, a rare smile tugging at his lips. He didn't need recognition or accolades. Seeing his family whole again was enough. The story of Kenneth Winters became a symbol of courage and redemption. It reminded people that even the most powerful forces could be brought to justice when individuals stood together and refused to back down. And for Henry, it was a reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, was always worth fighting for.